okay. So we'll send out, AJ is gonna, and I will introduce her officially in a second, but we will send out the link to the recording probably later today, as in addition to the PDF of the slides that AJ is going to use. So, and I will introduce AJ Steinberg, a very dear friend and wonderful colleague, partner of all things. We met a few years ago, and I'm so glad that we did, because AJ has, I think, brought so many of our organizations a lot of new knowledge around events, sponsorships, auctions, all the things. She's been an expert in this field for a long time. She's up in Malibu, but we're lucky that she has family here in San Diego. So she's down here, you know, fair enough, and has worked with a bunch of our local nonprofits as well, and just a wealth of knowledge. So she's a CFRE as well. I'm going to turn it over to you, AJ, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Excuse me for my voice being all froggy. Yeah, hi, everybody. All right, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen so you can see this. Get that. All right. You can all see that? Thumbs up? You can see it? All right, you guys, let's get started. All right, this is a rather new topic that I'm presenting on, but it's not, because it's a version of a webinar that I did right when COVID hit. Because talk about the entire world being caught flat-footed when it came to what the heck are we going to do with our fundraising events? We have no idea what's going on. That was sort of the apex of it. And I did a version of this that was very specific to the moment in COVID. And there were over 10,000 people that took that over a period of 3 days. We couldn't just do it in one day because too many people. So it was obviously a need, and I had hoped that I would put this aside and never have to think about it again. But that's not how life is. So let's talk about this. As Sharon says, I have been a professional event producer since 1999. That means I have been doing this since dinosaurs roamed the earth. That's before there were actual online platforms and we used spreadsheets. Lots of changes have happened. And I've been really fortunate because I've done over 100 successful events for amazing organizations and raised millions of dollars for them, because we do it together and we do it right. And that's the whole thing, is your events, you shouldn't be throwing more money at them to make them more successful. You should just be putting more thought into them and really rethinking the process. So that's always what I've said. And since 2000, I've been through a lot of disasters. It's pretty weird when you think about what's happened in the past 25 years. So here today, what we're going to be talking about is understanding the impact of disasters on your fundraising events. We're going to talk about how to make the critical decisions, because the decisions really are going to be, do you postpone or do you cancel? And then again, you could just have your events, but there's risk to that too. We're going to talk about crisis communication. And I think this is the gist of what I'm hoping you take away, is the value of knowing in advance how to communicate in crises, because it is not the same as when you're just saying, hey, here's great news about my impact and what you're doing. You are now the hub of information to a lot of people. And it's important that you take on that mantle and take it seriously. So then we're going to talk about thinking outside of yourself and thinking about your community and organization, and how to take the assets you have and collaborate to make it a stronger event for you, as well as help people who need it more than you do at that moment. And then we're going to talk about that long-term plan that I know a lot of you are here thinking about. How can we crisis-proof our events and our fundraising? And you can't, but you can mitigate it and have plans. So we will talk about that here. So one thing I like to say at the beginning of this particular topic is, this is not about politics. This is not about who turned off the water on fire hydrants. This is not about the conspiracy theories of who flew jets into planes. This is really about us in our sector being leaders because we are leaders in the community, and how to take that to the next level when we face a crisis and we ourselves have to figure out, hey, we need this money. Our fundraising event can't happen. What do we do? So this is not anything political here. But let's start at the beginning. Let's understand the impact that any disaster can have on your fundraising events. Now, look at this list. This is everything that has happened since I started doing event planning 25 years ago. We have been through the Twin Towers falling. And if you remember 9/11, it was followed by the anthrax scare. So disasters don't happen in a vacuum. Very often, there are little disasters that happen as ancillary results of it. We've had local terrorism, meaning we've had riots here. The stock market. Remember, disasters are not always natural. If you have a major fundraiser planned, and that is what you've been banking on for a majority of your money, and then the stock market takes a 20% dip, you better bet that your fundraising event needs to be tweaked to reflect the mood after there's been some kind of a major financial issue. If you go back to the Academy Awards in about 2009, 2010, look at the red carpet. Every single celebrity dresser who dressed the stars dressed them in somber colors, no trains, no jewels, no tiaras. They reflected the mood of the country. And that's important that we realize that an event and a gala, a Mardi Gras over the top gala is not really going to sit well to somebody who has literally lost 40 to 50% of their net worth. So we have to keep those kind of things in mind. COVID. Whoever thought that would happen, right? Well, apparently they think it's going to be happening again and again. And so we need to always keep our eye on the ball. And this is one thing I hope you take away from this webinar is read the paper, read your news feed, listen to the news, and pay attention. Don't just think it's happening someplace else, because things like this could be foreseen. You could see COVID coming. You could see the shutdown coming. I remember the first time someone gave me an elbow instead of a handshake. It was 2 days before the lockdown started, and I was giving a presentation in Palm Springs on events. And I saw that. And I thought, whoa, what is this? And then I thought, I better go plan because I knew that something bad was coming down the pipe. You need to be aware. Earthquakes, yes, earthquakes happen here. I'm not sure if you have earthquakes there. They can happen anywhere. They are such a sleeping giant in our world here in Los Angeles. It's basically we are ripe. And we just had, after we had these devastating fires, these fires were something that are biblical. I lived in Malibu for 30 years and I lost my house in a fire 6 years ago while I had a gala that was 2 weeks later. Okay, so in my world, 6 years ago, on the 8th of whatever the date, 8th of November, there was a shooting in Thousand Oaks, California, that killed 7 people in a bar, in a country western bar in Thousand Oaks. My client, literally, the symphony was 1 block away, and their gala was impacted by that shooting on the 8th of November. We scrambled on the 8th of November. We were trying to figure out how to pivot our messaging to to take in the grief of the community. But on the 9th of November, Malibu caught on fire and part of the city caught on fire. My house burned down. I didn't have the luxury of stopping because my house burned down. I still had this gala to go and to plan. So this is life. You have loss and you move on and you figure out what's best for the organization and the fundraisers. So this is all really personal to me. And this is not just me guessing what people would do. I have lived through it. And I will tell you, all of these things are going to be happening again. And I have my plans all in place for my clients. So here's the thing you're going to have to do is make a decision. Are you going to keep on going? Or you're going to postpone or cancel the event. And you will be shocked that not everybody is going to have the same opinion. It would be easy if it was like, oh, yeah. And there are times when it's easy, but sometimes you are really going to have to make a case for why your decision is the best one. So there are times when you don't have to make a decision. Unfortunately, that means your venue is impacted. Your venue is no longer there. It is no longer passable to your venue. Your venue has been closed due to a pandemic. Nothing you can do. Your organization's infrastructure is impacted. That means your office is burned down. Your offices are impassable. Your computer system has failed. You can't go to your offices. That means you can't make the decision. It's been made for you. A large contingent of your support base is impacted. If there's a huge amount of people who have lost their homes in a fire, and I'm using the fire because it's so new and it's so, all that data has been just immediately brought in, and it was so completely biblical in its disaster scope. So I belong to the West Side Guild, which is a group of 50 women. I am an alumni, but there are always 50 women who are involved in this Children's Hospital Los Angeles fundraiser. It's one event in November. It's a luncheon, and these women raise all the money and then have this luncheon. I received right after the fires in January a note saying that 73% of the people who are current members either lost their homes in the fire or can't get back into their homes. 73. And 43% of us as alumni also were impacted that way by the fire. So they said we are not going to be having our November luncheon. Instead, we will be taking care of the people who need it in our guild. So I want you to think about that. That's November. And that was a January email that we got. So this shows you that when your major support base has been impacted, everything is out the window. You need to take care of your people first. And I'm a big believer in that. And if the time frame is too close to decide, so if you had a fire in January, or if you had a flood in January, or you had COVID times two, whatever our new COVID-3 shows up, and your event is in February, it's a no-brainer. You don't have time to make a good assessment, so it can't happen. But sometimes you have to make a decision because it's not that cut and dried. So how is the decision made? First, you're going to do an internal assessment and discussion. Then you're going to do a board discussion, and then you're going to go to your major donors and key stakeholders and individually update them on what's happening. So let's take this piece by piece. An internal assessment and discussion is you gathering your staff and the people who are supporting your mission and doing kind of a survey, kind of taking it out, have a meeting. If you can do it in person, great. Do it via Zoom if you need to, but figure out where everybody stands. Is everybody safe? Are your offices operational? Do you have access to infrastructure and to computers? This is an important thing to do internally before you even go outward towards the board. Once you've assessed what's happening internally with your organization, then you need to bring that information to your board. So let's talk about how to make these decisions with your board. Don't talk to your board about disaster decision making before you internally have done that assessment we just talked about. So have your ducks in a row before you meet with them. Understand what you're going to tell them about infrastructure, your personnel, safety and health, and the empathy factor that we need to have with everything. How many of your supporters that you know of have been impacted? Have all that information before you meet with your board. And then what I always do with big decisions for a board is I find one person on the board who's an influencer. It could be your board president. I hope it's your board president, but many times I find there's somebody else who actually, anytime they speak, everybody perks up and they listen. So I like to get a hold of that person in advance, lay out all the facts, and get them to understand why I or my client chooses to either stay the course, cancel, or postpone. Having an advocate when you walk in makes all the difference in the world when it comes to a smooth discussion that's based on facts and information rather than on feelings. Although this is obviously going to be high emotion when you get together after a disaster, clearly lay out the options for them. If you can give them in advance a bullet pointed, very simple outline of what's happening and what decisions you've like to make and get their approval, that's really helpful. Just talking about it doesn't do the same as having it clearly laid out for them to see. That's how you get them to be on board. So you go in, you map the internal assessment, and then you have the board, you bring it to the board and and then once the board has given you the green light on what you feel is the best course of action to postpone, cancel, stay the course, then you will go talk to your key stakeholders. Key stakeholders always appreciate being informed ahead of just an email blast. And remember that anytime you communicate, whether it's a happy day or a disaster day, is a stewardship opportunity with key stakeholders, your sponsors, anybody. So reaching out to them first is a step in that stewardship process that needs to continue even though a disaster has hit your community. So what are the reasons that you would have to postpone or cancel instead of stay the course with your fundraising event? Dire community impact, and that means your organization's offices can't be accessed or destroyed. And doesn't that sound awful? You're like, how that's just talking about somebody else. That's not talking about me. Doesn't that sort of feel like that? But there are about 1,000 organizations in Pasadena and the Palisades who no longer have offices. In fact, I had a sponsor for another event that I'm doing that's not in that region. And when I reached out to them for their sponsorship payment, they just had an auto response that said, our, our offices have been destroyed in the Palisades fire. That's all it said. Like, okay, you just don't know. You just don't know who's affected. So if the venue is impacted and won't be available, meaning I'm sorry, there's no way that our doors will physically be open or even be there on the date that you have contracted for your event, then you need to either postpone or cancel. Community sensitivity is important. Your supporters' level of impact and empathy. So that's a big deal because, like I said, this one group I'm a member of is incredibly impacted themselves by the fires. It's the empathy of the other people who are on the board and on the committee that also play into the decision of whether or not to have the event continue. So, the committee and board's level of impact. So here's an example of a long time ago. So I am talking 20 years ago. I sat on a committee for what's a cook's tour in Malibu. Now, Malibu has fires. Yes, we do. And there was a fire just 2 months before this Cook's tour, which was a tour of the homes, the 4 beautiful mansions in Malibu. People from all over Los Angeles came. We had sold the tickets already. The houses were lined up. Everything was done. And then there was a fire. None of the houses were impacted by the fire, but a portion of Malibu, much further to the south, was impacted. We got together with the committee, and 9 out of 10 of us were like, this can't happen. We cannot be traipsing people through beautiful mansions in Malibu when other people's homes in Malibu have burned to the ground. We have to have some sensitivity. And there was one woman who said, they just got to get over it. That was it. She had absolutely no problem with continuing on with what we did. We let her talk, and ultimately we did postpone it. We had to shift a lot of things. We lost a lot of money, but it was important that we didn't come off as calloused and not caring about our other communities section that had burned. So you have to understand that, hey, we're in Balboa Park and we're fine, but something terrible has happened over in Del Mar. You still have to have understanding that that impacts the people on your board and your committees as well. Honorary speaker and vendor availability will be something you have to consider. Do we postpone or do we cancel if an important element is no longer available? If you had a very important speaker who was a keynote and everybody was excited, that was the highlight of your event. And then because of the fire, you had to postpone and they're no longer available to speak on that date. Do you get a new speaker? Do you just cancel? You have to take that into consideration as well, especially with honorees. If something happens to your honoree, you may want to have to decide to postpone or cancel. So if you're going to postpone, this means, okay, we feel confident that we can pull this off a little further down the line. Things will cool down, things will go back to normal. If you decide to postpone, first you have to think about the optimal date, because you have to understand that, of course, we have a timeline. Most things happen in California. We have fall galas and fall events, and we have spring events, not so much in the winter and not so much in the summer. So when do you do that? And I want you to think about this. If you take one thing away from this entire webinar, you do not have time to navel gaze during this moment of decision. You do not have time to feel sorry and wring your hands. Just like when my house burned down, I did not have time to cry and be sorry until that event was done and until I had my family safely in a house. I knew there'd be 1,000 other families looking for a temporary home the minute that they came out of their grieving period. So I didn't grieve. I just immediately went on Truilia and found a rent. I was the very first person, literally 2 a.m. My house burned down at 2:01. I was putting in applications for houses because I knew if I waited, I'd be at the back of the line. This is the same with your dates for postponing. There will be 1,000 other organizations in the same boat as you, looking for a new date or a new venue to find a date. Be the first to make the call to as many venues as seemingly you can find that would be a good fit, and ask about putting a hold on those dates that you want, because you will be first in line. You will get it while everybody else is still debating with their board whether to put. You are ahead of the game, and I can't stress enough, being ahead of the game during a disaster is the difference between having control over what's going to happen with your fundraising event, your fundraising, your whole organization, and just kind of having to take what comes. Very important. So you need to consider what would be the optimal new date. Once again, you got to do the whole thing you did before when you first chose a date. Who's available? No holidays. Is it spring? Is it fall? Who's going to be here? Find the optimal date and then hop on those vendors and that venue especially, and then the speakers. Get them lined up as soon as you know. If there's a date you want, or you have 3 dates that can work, line them all 3 up and then just cancel the other 2 once you finally get a venue that's right for that date. You need to decide, will guests and sponsors stay on board? That's why you look at a date, because you want to make sure the guests are not going to be on summer break or winter vacation. Sponsors, making sure that they're going to stay on board as well. And here's something important. Your messaging has to change. So you may be celebrating your 35th year as an organization as the old messaging that you were doing. Hey, I love celebrations. Everything I do is a celebration of this, a celebration of this, not after a disaster. It all turns to healing. Everything thematic in your events should be healing, community as healing, and using that messaging in your communications, and we'll talk about communications later, is super, super valuable, because it's unbelievable the amount of nonprofits that disappear during a disaster because they're stressed, they're terrified, they're kind of just scrambling, to say the least. If you continue to communicate, you will head over hand. You will be heads above every other organization that unfortunately is just struggling to figure out what to do. Now, if you're going to postpone, this is what you've got to consider. that messaging we just talked about. No more celebrations. This is all about community and healing. You've got to pivot your messaging from the minute that invitation goes out. And then you want to pivot and stay engaged with guests. Do not say, hey, we're postponing, we'll get back to you. Keep engaged, keep in touch. If you have board members who know your guests, have them personally call or personally email them. Keep this as a stewardship opportunity. And I know that sounds like, well, it seems like we shouldn't be doing stewardship while so many people are suffering. No, stewardship is relationship building. This is when your relationships are needed the most, right? This is when we prove the value of community and relationship. So if you postpone, keep in touch and engaged with your guests. Keep in touch with your sponsors. Keep promoting them on social media and on email blasts about your event and otherwise, because there's nothing wrong with contacting a sponsor and saying, we're going to be postponing. We're so glad we're going to keep you on as a sponsor. Here's what we'd like to do in the meantime. If you are doing something special for the community and are raising funds, we will promote that in an email blast. Let's say our wonderful sponsor, Jiffy Lube, has a fund for people who lost their homes. Whatever they're doing, find out. Be a partner to your sponsors. It's our chance to show them that things go both ways. And then I would like to say, if you have a few extra months, fix your events. I know you've heard me say this before, but there's a lot of really mediocre to bad events out there, and they don't have to be. So if you have seen lagging ticket sales, if you've heard grumbling from your board about your events, you know what? Because we're pivoting the messaging, it's an awesome opportunity for you to take that and to think, how are we going to pivot our event? What can we cut out so it's not 4 hours of sitting down listening to people talk at us? And how can we make this about our community? If you have any questions about how to do that, you just email me, aj@queenbeefundraising.com. Just email me and I will give you some hints about how you can improve your events. I'm a big proponent of fixing them. So, no, that's all if you're going to postpone. If you decide to cancel, check what your insurance covers. Check your business insurance first. You want to find out if any of the losses you're going to incur that are hard costs are covered by your insurance. Then you're going to offer guests an option to donate rather than get reimbursed. This is an email, and I think I have an email. So once again, aj@queenbeefundraising.com. You can email me and I'll go dig up my emails because believe me, during COVID, we did a lot of emails samples that were about postponing and then canceling and giving people the option to make that instead of a refund. Hey, here's your $500 back. It was, we'd like to offer the opportunity for your $500 to be a donation to help us further the mission that we're doing, which we need now more than ever. So those kind of communications are super valuable. Figure out what you can offer value to sponsors now that you are not going to be having a gala to promote them, right? So, hey, maybe we have a Zoom with our sponsors. Maybe we do a cocktail Zoom party with our sponsors to promote our sponsors, and people can just click on and we'll all do the fun stuff we did during COVID via Zoom. Figure out how you're going. What is your communication plan? How are you going to keep in touch with guests and sponsors throughout the year? Just because your event is canceled doesn't mean you don't want that stewardship to continue because that's what an event is. It's a stewardship opportunity. So how will you keep in touch with them? Not just sending them email blasts saying, donate now, donate now. Are you going to be a source of really good information for the community to help them see what's happening overall in the community? See, hey, this is what we're doing to help you and your neighbors. Let yourself become a center hub of information, a center hub of help for the community, and then suddenly that you're not just a nonprofit, you're a trusted, loyal partner in the community, and that's what an opportunity like a disaster really does give to us. Now, if you're going to cancel, consider doing this. Printing your tribute book digitally. If you are so far along that you've already got your sponsors and most of the pages done and your tribute ads, continue on. We always make them digitally anyway. Hey, when they go to the printer, they're digital. So print your tribute book digitally and then send it to everybody on your email list. This is a huge boost to the sponsors. It gives them something of value that you can prove that you're continuing on. It still tells a story of your event, your organization stories in there, your honoree story is in there. All of those ads are still in there. Print it digitally. Keep that. You spend all the time on it. Just keep it going. Put your auction online. It is a moneymaker. I'm not a huge auction fan, but if you got it and you were going to do it, all these online platforms, you just click it with a switch, put your auction online. Line up a virtual fundraiser if you absolutely have to, because you can't do a live one. Virtual fundraisers are great during disasters because people will show up for them. They trickle down in terms of their efficacy as we move further away from a disaster. Sometimes a virtual fundraiser actually turns out to be something that organizations will keep year after year. So an example of that was during COVID, I worked with New Orleans AFP as for a conference. I was a keynote for a virtual conference. And one of the speakers there was a beloved high school that put on this huge battle of the bands of all the alumni. And instead of doing it live in New Orleans, they had to do it virtual. And what happened was the turnout was so phenomenal, and it was against every rule of Zoom that says a 1 hour fundraiser is all you can do. They had a 10-hour fundraiser, and each hour was a different year's band playing. And I don't know how they did the logistics of it and how they recorded it, or maybe they had a sample of it, but every hour was a different year of that school's bands, and people could tune in who had been at that school from all over the world, and they were all over the world. So it was so much fun, and people from everywhere could enjoy it, that they kept that after COVID, but not many fundraisers that were virtual have stuck. Calling loyal supporters for a check-in. The telephone will always be the most intimate way, aside from in person, of really connecting with your supporters. And it's not just your major donors. If you know that a supporter's been impacted, it doesn't matter if they're a minor supporter. If you know their phone number, maybe you and the board can get together and divvy them up and call a few of them. And you'd be shocked at how touched any donor is to get a phone call, especially if they're not expecting it because they're not a major donor. So in the future, when disasters may be happening in the future, include a cancellation clause as a part of your ticketing verbiage. Now, every time I write any kind of an online platform for ticketing, I include the clause in case of postponement or in case of cancellation, your ticket will be considered a donation. I have verbiage for that somewhere too, if you want to get a hold of me. Super important to include that. Now, just because that's on your ticketing website, and when they click pay here, it's a part of their understanding that they know that, hey, if this gets canceled, I'm just going to make this a donation. You still should send out an email about that. The reason being is that it just is polite to say, hey, we're canceling, your ticket has a clause that says that your ticketing price is now going to be considered a donation. If anyone would like this to be transferred as a refund, please contact us. Now, in COVID, when we had to send out those letters because nobody had cancellation clauses like that, when we sent out the email blast saying, we hope you'll consider this a donation, but if you want a refund, please contact me. I would say that for all my clients, I would say 1% of the people emailed back and said, I want my ticket money back. They did, 1%. And I thanked them very much when I responded to them and asked how they wanted us to refund it. And we did. But it was worth it to not look like we were just taking their money and then having them pissed off. Look carefully when you sign your venue contracts and your vendor contracts Ask if there's cancellation clauses in case of natural disaster. If there's not, ask if you can negotiate one. Sometimes they'll say no. Sometimes they will have a clause like that. But if you've made a big deposit and that venue shuts down because it's no longer usable, figure out, ask them what happens to our deposit. It might be good to know. Have written protocols to help guide you through disasters. It is so helpful to say, hey, look at, use Chat GPT. No shame in it. Say, Chat GPT, can you create a disaster step-by-step protocol if we need to cancel and decide to cancel or postpone an event due to a national disaster? Have a written protocol. Have it as a part of your handbook. Have HR have it, but that will at least be something you can look at to remind yourself if you need to do something. And please look into event insurance. It's something you can get. We get it for rain. There are rain insurance policies for outdoor events. We have one in every December over here in Thousand Oaks, and I will tell you, we get rain insurance. But look into the cost of event insurance in case something happens, and look at your own policy and see what's covered there. All right. Does anybody have any questions? I'm not seeing, I don't really, let's look over here. I don't even know how to do chat when I'm sharing my screen. Sorry, you guys, I can't see chat when I'm sharing my screen. Sharon, is there anything that anyone wants to say, or you can just unmute if you want to ask a question?
It looks like we don't have any questions in the chat, but anybody who wants to unmute, as AJ just said, please go ahead.
AJ, Renee here. I just want to say, I was going to type this out, but what you are sharing with us, your knowledge and experience is like the gold in an Egyptian tomb that you have unearthed for us.
I'm glad this is being recorded.
Oh, I forgot that part, but I'm up here cutting your screen page. I know you're sending us the slides, but I put the slide and I type these notes. What you're saying is like little gold nugget. So I'm going to let the floor go.
Thank you, Renee. I wish I didn't have to be giving you these nuggets, but it is super helpful to.
And just real quick, with my organization, I won't get into why, but we did have to cancel something. And I was on with them. I'm like, are we canceling or postponing? You realize these are two different words with two different meanings. So thank you.
You're welcome, Renee. And Renee has obviously seen the disparity in opinions and the disparity in empathy. I think that's something we have to consider, is that we're coming from all of this from a professional and an organizational, but now we're also wetting the community empathy. And that's an important thing to include when we make decisions on this level. So I'm glad that I'm glad that we can talk about all this. So crisis communications, this is so important because it's not something that's considered in advance, but it should be. Communications is important because it preserves trust and credibility. So the people who know you, the more that you communicate with them when things are tough, it just reinforces that feeling of trust with you. It also, you are now a community leader. There's misinformation that goes out. I can't even tell you how many ridiculous things, it's stupid, come out when there is a disaster and there's not a lot of real information that you can get. Panic, confusion, misinformation. You can become a leader to be a beacon of straight talk and straight thinking for a lot of people. It also keeps the stewardship going for donors, attendees, stakeholders. It keeps them in the loop. So that's why it's important. But you need to not do your navel gazing. You really do need to realize that, like with any emergency, the first 24 hours are important on how you do this. So, first thing you need to do is acknowledge it. Like, you don't need to be blind to see that half of, Mission Bay is on fire, but acknowledging it, saying, hey, we know that there's a crisis out there. And then you need to also say what the crisis's impact. We know there are families who have lost their homes. We know there are families who don't have their homes. We know there are children who don't have school. We know that there are lack of beds and resources for these families. Talking about that is not saying, oh my God, the world's ending. What it's doing is saying, okay, here's a situation. and we understand the impact. But then you need to say, our hearts, this is such a cliche, but our hearts go out to everyone affected by this and our whole community. And then you say, we anticipate that these things are going to happen. It could be, we anticipate that that the city is on top of getting shelters. We anticipate that all the nonprofits that we know are rallying together, and then we will be in touch with you on a regular basis to let you know what's happening with your community, with our organization, and with our event. No, the event, who the hell cares when the world's on fire, right? But you do care because that's a huge revenue stream for you. We are still a business. So provide updates. There's nothing wrong with a daily touch-in, check-in, saying, hey, checking in, letting you know. We hear that here's our new map of where the shelters are. Here's a new map of where you can get gasoline. I mean, I was just in Cuba just a few days ago, and the entire nation lost its power. The entire nation lost its power for 2.5 days. And you don't think about the impact until you realize the bus you're on needs gas, and gas runs on electricity to be pumped into the buses. So I won't go into the details, but believe me, updates on where you could get gas was huge. If it's an earthquake, knowing where you can get gas, knowing where there's food and water is huge. So providing updates that aren't about your organization is really a great way of keeping your people safe, keeping your people informed, and making yourself be that place they go for good information. And let people know you're working on a plan, saying our mission was impacted. This is what we're doing to move forward. It all can be in an email every day. Then as it gets less dire, every other day. Do not worry about giving too much good information, too much empathy and love to anybody. Now, in a crisis, people blab. Blah, 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 blah. So let's think about what we're going to say in a crisis that's good. Always express concern and empathy for those affected. It gets old when you hear our hearts go out, our hearts and prayers go out to those affected by the flood. You had a big flood a while ago, the earthquake, the fire. But you still have to say it. It doesn't matter how old it gets. It is still important to lead with empathy and concern. And then when you're talking about your event, be clear about your decision. Don't just go, we're still thinking about, if it's going to be safe to go back in that area by November. Be clear about the decision. Once you make it, be clear about what your decision is, and then offer that solution. We'd love it if you would consider this a donation so that we can continue to do our mission that has been important to you and is important to us. But let us know if you'd like us to give you a refund, offer solutions, and keep stakeholders. If you can make your email blast informative with regular updates, not just right when it happens, but on an ongoing basis, it's incredibly powerful. So just so you know, the city of Los Angeles, because I still have a property, it's nothing on it, in Malibu, I still get all the informational emails from the county of Los Angeles, and it is daily. They give updates on what's happening with debris removal, opening of roads, because a lot of the roads are still closed and impassable in the canyon. So, they are doing a good job, I will say that, of keeping us updated, the stakeholders. Now, here's a sample event postponement message. You will be getting these slides, so you don't have to write this down or take screenshots unless you want to. But say there's something that's dire that happened unexpectedly. So this would be if you're postponing. This is just postponing because of an earthquake or a fire. It happened fast. These you want to say, due to recent disasters, we've made the difficult decision to postpone this. Our hearts go out. So there's our hearts go out, everyone affected. That's important. And then we appreciate your understanding. You have to show appreciation. Thank you for understanding. We're just human. We're just doing our work. We're trying our best. And then thank you for your continued support during this challenging time. Put that in there. You never can say thank you enough, even when it's something that's just like, what is going on here? So that's if you have a fire, an earthquake, landslide, flood, whatever thing is going to happen. All right. Now, this is different. This is a pandemic because a pandemic is open ended. What the heck just happened and who knows when? And there's going to be many people who have very different opinions than you do about how to deal with the health issues that go with the pandemic. That pandemic and health related disasters are politically charged. So we want to stay away. Remember we talked about political, we're not getting political. We do not go political ever. We are respectful of everybody's right to have an opinion, even if it's different than ours. So due to the ongoing impact of what a horrific pandemic we have, we've made the decision to postpone it for the safety of our attendees, staff, and community. Okay, so now we're talking safety. They may not agree with you about whether or not it's safe to just walk around sneezing and coughing on their friends during a pandemic, but when they hear you're doing it for safety, they kind of go, okay, we're safe. So once again, we appreciate your patience and thank you for understanding. Kind of the same there, but it's different. This is about safety of attendees. Now, if you're going to cancel your event, this is what you do. You regret. We regret to let you know. We regret to inform you, or we're so disappointed to let you know. Whatever words you want to say, we want a difficult decision to cancel. Definitely difficult. We were hopeful to reschedule. It's been clear it's not possible at this time. Typical start paragraph. Then you're thankful. We deeply appreciate your support and understanding. And though we won't be gathering, our mission remains unchanged. We hope you'll continue to stand with us. And if you want to support us more, give them a place, give them a call to action. Okay. And then this is also where you're going to say, we hope it'll become a donation rather than a refund, whatever you're going to say. So that's the sample for the cancellation messaging. All right, so that's the communication. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask about the communications for that? You don't have to. I'm not making you, but I do stop to let you know. Sharon?
Thank you. No, it looks no questions in the chat, but anybody can go for it too.
They're like, no, we're having our coffee. We're fine.
Sounds
Okay,
good.
coffee sounds good right now, doesn't it? All right, let's talk about your community and your organization because we do not live in a bubble, right? Oh, great. So if you hear a leaf blower, I apologize. Apparently, my gardener decided to come early. Okay. All right. So supporting your community and organization, your community, you need to look at the immediate needs of your entire community. I am a big believer in collaborations. Every single organization can look around and find other organizations they can hold hands with, send supporters, share supporters, do things for, just like with Robin's Nest. I just saw somebody who was looking for a place for a concert venue, and I'm thinking, Robin's Nest, let's put them together. So I'm a big believer of this. So you need to take a minute to look and see what your entire community needs. And then you need to leverage your networks. You need to think about who to put together so that they're able to help each other. We all know lots of nonprofit professionals. If you hear of a struggle with one particular issue and you know of a nonprofit that has resources that can be sent there, put them together. It's super, super important that we're in this together. And then determine your organization's role. If you're an animal rescue and there's a natural disaster, you are in the forefront of saying, who should I talk to about what my organization can do, right? So determine your organization's role. And then if you have an event that you're postponing or you're canceling, you had volunteers who had signed up to help you with that. This is your time to reach out to those volunteers and say, let's be superheroes for the community. Here's other volunteer opportunities. You can say, let's do this as a group, maybe your whole group. And you say, let's as volunteers as one group, go do this. Let's go help sandbag, or let's go help at a shelter or get food out. Let's do that as a group, or you can give volunteer opportunities to your volunteers. You know that they love to help, they're part of the community. Give them ways that they can do that. using your event, if you're still going to have your event or some kind of an event, shift your ticket sales to become donations. So in other words, if you had an event, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. If you had an event and you're no longer hosting that event and people have already given you money, you can give them the option to make that a donation to another rescue organization, to an organization that's doing work in the community. You can host a virtual fundraiser. So if you had to cancel yours, you can host a virtual fundraiser. So that's still keeping awareness on your organization, but you can also have links to other organizations in the community that are doing work that's immediate. You can support other organizations. You can just send out an email blast and say, hey, we love your support. Thank you. If you feel that there's more you want to do in our community, here's some ways that you can do it. So what you're kind of doing is you're putting community above self. And in the long run, in terms of stewardship, that makes you really look like a superhero. So messaging tips to continue the stewardship and engaging. Be transparent about the crisis's impact on the organization. Your messaging should either be, we continue to not be able to get into our offices. We want to let you know we're working remotely to get our mission back on track, and we'll let you know week by week how the progress is. Or you can say, our organization is 100% fine. We're fully working and we're using some of our resources to help the community in other ways. Be transparent about the impact on your organization and what you're doing. And then what are you doing to help others in the community? That is really important along the way to say, tell stories. Remember, we're always talking about storytelling, tell impact stories and say, where we typically will be rescuing dogs from Tijuana, this week we went out to the Mission District where the dogs were wandering free after a fire hit the area, and we picked up the dogs and we rescued 27 dogs, and to date 15 of those dogs have been returned to their families, and we're finding new homes for the ones that apparently were strays. Whatever it is, what are you doing to help? Tell a story. Tell the story of Fluffy, who was found half burnt with his tail off, but he has been healed by you and you're finding him a forever home. Whatever it is, find a story that's going to outline what you're doing. Whoops. Encourage donations, volunteering, and sharing of resources. Once again, this is the one time, disaster is the one time I really do say, we all need help, but sometimes more immediate help is needed by others. And keep updates flowing. Don't stop being that trusted source of information. Keep updates flowing, people. If they don't want to open it, they won't, but don't back off. Keep your pedal on the gas when it comes to keeping in touch probably every week with more information and more stories. All right, so let's talk about the long-term plan. What are you going to do long-term to make sure that when a crisis happens, you are ready for it? The first thing you're going to do is look at past crises. What strategies worked for you? What strategies worked for other organizations? Or AJ, who's been through 20 million different disasters. And then what organizational mistakes were made? Meaning, what things happened that you were flat-footed on? Did you speak to your board too soon before you knew what you wanted to do? Did you not have funds that were put aside in case of a disaster? And what can be improved? Those are the three things that you can learn from past crises. So let's talk about how to create a crisis-ready event plan. You can extrapolate this. You can take this and move it even over to your regular fundraising. I'm talking about fundraising plans, but I think anything relating fundraising events, and this is a fundraising event plan, can be taken and just kind of morphed into an actual fundraising plan. So anything for events can be morphed into regular fundraising as well. So the first thing you need to do is take time to really put pen to paper to think about what risks actually can happen potentially in the future. Now, you are not going to have a hurricane, probably. You are probably not going to have a tsunami. You are probably not going to have a snowstorm, blizzard. You could have an earthquake, maybe. You definitely could have something that would be like a fire. You could have floods, right? You could quite honestly, if there was a nuclear problem, I mean, I know Coronado is like ground zero. I'm not saying it's going to be happening, but I mean, these are things that happen. COVID or the next pandemic could happen. An electrical EMP, an electrical outage of the entire grid could happen. So just list them because each of them is unique unto themselves. I mean, then you can look at each of them and think about your contingency plans. If it's just the electrical grid going out, do you have generators? How can you get a generator? Where will have generators? What kind of communications will you have with each other, with with your event things? What about your venue? Have plan Bs and plan Cs. If it's a fire, it's different. Where will we go if our immediate area burns? What happens if it's an area that's next to us? How far should we be worried about this? So have plans B and C. And then crisis communication strategy. Who are you going to contact? Now, if it's an event, communication strategy, you're going to first be contacting, of course, each other to assess what your internal staff is doing and how are they okay? Are they well? Are they mobile? Are they able to get to work? And then you're going to contact next your venue to figure out what's going on there and your venues. So who to contact first, have a contact list. Crisis communication strategy. Like I said, I have pre-written communicate. You could probably just steal the ones that are on these slides, but pre-written messaging about cancellation, postponement, just information. We're going to be getting more information to you. So have a communication plan. You write it in 2 seconds. ChatGPT can do it, believe it or not, for you. And then please consider event insurance. If it's available to you, consider event insurance. Check your own insurance for business disruption policies, things like that, but see what's available. And don't forget to check your contracts with your vendors and your venues. Make sure that when you're signing contracts that they have flexibility in case of an emergency. Super valuable. So another thing you're going to do to be disaster proofing your events is you're going to look at financial resilience. Those of you who are looking to have an event give you 50% or more of your revenue for an entire year, you have to understand you need to have a little bit of reserves put aside in case that event can't happen. Because if it can't happen, you're in trouble. So really say, all right, if we don't have an event happening, how much do we need for 2-3 months of operating costs? Now, if it's such a terrible disaster that everybody's impacted, there is federal funding that can help you through this period of time. There are foundations that can help you as well. But you should think, if we're having an event, you know what, do we keep a little bit aside, just so that in case it doesn't happen, we don't go bust. Look at event insurance. You can tell I'm very big on event insurance. And reduce your resilience on fundraising event. And I'm sure Sharon is nodding her head. I can't see her, but she's nodding her head up and down. Folks, fundraising events are one tool in your fundraising toolkit. There's Sharon. Events, and you would think she's an event planner. She must love galas. No, not only do I not want everybody to have a gala, I want everybody to look at other ways of fundraising. I want you to look towards relationship building, monthly giving. I want you to look towards all different ways of raising funds. And a fundraising event is a stewardship event extraordinaire, but it is not the only egg that should be in your fundraising bunny basket. Develop a rapid response fundraising strategy. Be clear with your board and your staff that in case a disaster happens, you will be convening immediately, not even tomorrow. The minute that you're able to get your hands on a cell phone, your first priority, unless your life is in peril and your family's life is in peril, is to really start the wheels in motion for decision making. That's really important. You can understand when there's 1,000 organizations who have lost their offices and who have lost their venues for the events, the person who is first on the draw is going to be the victor in the end. Not to make it sound like a war, but it feels like it sometimes. So to recap what we've just talked about, takeaways and action steps: be proactive, not reactive. Do put together a plan now. You may never have to look at it. God bless you. That would be fantastic. But I have a feeling, at least in the pandemics and things like that, something's going to happen. And also, too, going back to this, whoops, here, a financial disaster in the economy. If anybody else is old like me and has lived through 2008, it's a disaster. It's as much of a disaster as if there was a slow slide into the ocean of half of San Diego. You need to plan for it. You need to be the person who sees it coming, who has a conversation with your major stakeholders in advance about how you can disaster proof your relationship, financial relationship with them. Look at your finances, cut back where you can, and start planning now. I cannot stress that enough. We could be in for this hugely wonderful, unicorn, rainbow filled economy, but it doesn't feel like it. Communicate clearly and quickly, because transparency builds trust, and that puts you in a stewardship leadership position. Adapt and pivot as needed. You just don't know what's going to be thrown at you. You don't know how quickly things can turn. Be flexible. If you think, oh, our offices are fine, and suddenly says, oh, no, what, gas main just broke and your place is out too, be flexible. Realize it's an ongoing process. Strengthen financial and operational resiliency. Do not rely just on events for your fundraising. Learn from past crises. Improve future response strategies. So those are the main takeaways from this thing. And this is me. All of you probably know me already, and I'll stop sharing my screen, but that's my email. If you want anything from me, you just let me know. I will send it to you. Sharon's like a little bobblehead there. She's nodding her head.
I know. I always
Okay,
think that.
that's
Thank you. Thank you so much, AJ. As always, so great and just fantastic information. And you're seeing some of the comments there too of everybody saying how inspiring and strategic the slides were. So thank you.
okay. Hi, Carol.
Yeah, Carol's here. Yeah.
Good.
So
Well, thank you,
appreciate
everybody.
it.
And thank you. I know that this will be recorded. And so in like 2 months, when the next disaster happens, suddenly people can get a hold of this, I'm sure, on the Leech Tag or the Hive. Do that. Very good. Thank you, everybody. I
Thank
appreciate
you,
you
AJ.
coming. Thank you
Thank
for
you,
joining
AJ.
us.
Have a good
Thank
day,
you so
everybody.
much. We will talk to you later, and remind me about putting you together with that other foundation. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Right.
All right.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you so much.
Take
Bye,
care.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.